You know how COVID has put us all into a rest state. One of the things that I always noticed about myself was that when I was in that rest state, that is usually when a very dark, gloomy mindset came on. I often was tearful, but I couldn't quite, put my hand on it. And I remember it was one Christmas that I remember saying to myself, okay, this has got to stop. And so I went to Google, as most of us do, and I typed in a different type of therapy. That was my exact phrase.
Yeah.
There's one person popped up, but they had left a comment about moving through this forgiveness journey and how much it had healed them. And I thought, okay, that's what I need.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Meta Transitions. Today we have with us Dr. Joan. Dr. Joan was a professor of nursing, and during her transition, she learned the art and science of forgiveness and its powerful healing effects. She has been a practicing nursing practitioner in Ontario, Canada for the past few years, and her transition continues today. She has a PhD in mental health promotion and a master focus on community health and development. And she's now using all her gifts and talents to unify the Black community and to build the first progressive all-Black community in Canada. Quite the undertaking, and we're happy to have you here with us, Dr. Joan.
Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I'm excited to be speaking with you and just, to touch base with someone who's out west, as I myself will be making a transition out there at some point.
Yes, definitely. All right. And I'll be happy to welcome you here as well. The more the merrier. All right. Okay. So now that you've sort of talked a little bit, we've talked a little bit about, the idea of transitioning and how that was something that was, I guess, a piece for you from nursing into sort of forgiveness and psychotherapy. Tell us a bit more about that. What is your transition story?
Yeah. So much like, how COVID has put us all into a rest state. One of the things that I always noticed about myself was that when I was in that rest state, that is usually when a very dark, gloomy mindset came on. I often was tearful, but I couldn't quite, put my hand on it. I was often angry, but I couldn't quite sort it out. And I remember it was one Christmas after I'd been experiencing a rather tumultuous semester that I remember saying to myself, okay, this has got to stop. Like, when I rest, I want to rest. It's kind of like the end of the exam period. It's the 2 weeks of Christmas. Everything is shut down. You can't keep busy anymore.
Yes.
And I don't want to keep busy, actually. I just want to rest. But as soon as I begin to rest, then these looming dark feelings come over me. And I said to myself, I know I need to do something, but I need to do something a little bit different than the traditional. I want to actually look, at a different type of therapy. And so I went to Google, as most of us do, and I typed in a different type of therapy. That was my exact phrase, a different therapy. And
Yes.
This one person popped up. I even forget the platform they were on, but they had left a comment about moving through this forgiveness journey and how much in one session it had healed them. And I thought, okay, that's what I need, right? So I called this lady, her name was Lynn, and I spoke to her about what I was looking for. And she said, well, I happen to have an orientation meeting tonight, so you're welcome to come. So at the time, I was also thinking that my marriage needed to be fixed. And what I would discover later on was just I needed to be fixed. And so I proceeded to go to the orientation. I brought my husband with me, and I listened to what she had to say. And as she spoke about her own traumatic moments over her lifetime, it was like I was meeting myself. She talked about, her sister being hit when she was younger, and that her sister had died, and the trauma of that. And I had experienced when I was 10 years old, my brother being hit by a car, and very much thinking at that time, he's gonna die. And I remember the screams and the wails, no, my brother, don't die, don't die, don't die. And I was experiencing in the aftermath of that PTSD, but of course, I was in Jamaica, I was transitioning to Canada, and in the same week, my brother was hit. And so when I transitioned to Canada, I had been altered very permanently by this event, but because I was now transitioning to a mother who had not seen me for almost 7 years, she couldn't tell that there was something different about me, and I couldn't express it. So as I moved through my journey, what I would experience from my mother is, rather than understanding what I was experiencing and me even not knowing what it was, is often I would receive very harsh punishments because I wasn't behaving the way that she wanted or thought was normal. And so there were these periods where she was quite abusive towards me, and one in particular was extremely abusive. And in my therapy now that I do, I talk about a death wish moment that we all make when we become extremely overwhelmed. And it was in that moment that I made a death wish. I was just like, if this is what life is like, I'm done, I'm not living it. And I literally paused there. I paused there. So when I'm now, in this rest state, and I proceed to do this therapy, in 3 sessions, I forgive first my mother for leaving me when I'm a young child. Then I skip over the accident with my brother, and I forgive my mother for that death wish moment. And so many things came to life, so much understanding and awareness of the decisions that I had made. And I like to say that it was like one of these moments where you go to the chiropractor and your spine is straightened, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm back.
Like, oh my God, right away. Like everything is functional now.
Everything is functioning now.
I'm myself now.
And so that was a pivotal moment of beginning my transition. And I had been in this space where I knew I was being called into ministry, but I didn't know what my ministry work was going to look like. And I knew God had a bigger purpose for my life, because every day I was at this university teaching, I kept saying to myself, I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be doing something else. I'm supposed to be doing something so much bigger than this. But I feel stuck here. I don't know where I'm supposed to go. But after I got rid of my forgiveness and unforgiveness and continued to forgive, the clarity came. I could pray, and immediately the responses would come. Shortly after that, I would begin to have visions, and I've always been a dreamer, but now my dreams were prophetic in a way where if I dreamt something, almost immediately it would happen. And so it sunk me in to myself in a way that almost immediately transformed me and opened me up to kind of continuing the journey to where I am and even progressing into the future.
Wow, what a story. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, and I was talking to a colleague the other day and just talking about sort of the idea of sharing our deep stories, with others, and how freeing that could be, right? And I'm listening to your story, and I'm recognizing how you were able to realize that something was wrong, in those rest times. Because when you're resting, it's supposed to be a relaxing, I'm seeing the relax there behind you. It's supposed to be a relaxing experience. But for you, it was more dread and heavy and dark. And, you recognize that something had to be, something was wrong with this. And your resourcefulness, I need to say that your resourcefulness and insight led you to seek help, right? And you were able to find the help that you needed through this forgiveness course. And it sounds like you had to explore sort of, again, the past to be able to identify what was happening for you in the future, for you to be able to then determine what you should do in the present, for you to be able to determine what to do in the future. And that's
Absolutely.
really interesting. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So what I teach my clients, and what continues to evolve, because I make forgiveness a daily practice, amongst a bunch of other things that I make a part of my spiritual practice. Forgiveness is one of them. And I always take my clients back to the very first moment when they are wounded. And so I call it a wounding, and that we have to heal the wound. So the 3-year-old wound, I had many wounds actually. So the 3-year-old wound of my mother leaving, which so many mothers migrate, right?
Yes.
As Black women, oftentimes they are going ahead, they're the pioneers. And so my mother's leaving was a great wound for me. I had a younger brother and I have a twin sister, but they didn't experience my mother's leaving in the way that I did. I always had a memory of her getting on the plane. I was only 3, but I had that memory. And so we go back to the first moment in time. I had to go back to that first moment in time. And then I had to recognize some of the decisions that I made, even as a child in that moment. And so one of the decisions that I made was that I would go seeking. You know, I was always running after something. I was always trying to find something. And so a lot of us make that decision as well. Like, I need to seek, I need to find this thing that is gone from me. And so when I realized in that first forgiveness session, the decision I'd made, I really realized that I wasn't being present because I was always searching for something. So as soon as I saw that, and I was able to say, okay, I have found what I've been searching for. So I can stop running after other things now. I can just be in the present moment. And when we're able to be present, it shifts absolutely everything. It shifts how you taste your food. It shifts how you hear the sounds in the environment. It shifts how you're able to attend to and to speak to people. It shifts how you're able to just even engage with your partner in an intimate way and yet be present in all of that, rather than having your mind constantly searching after something and trying to fill an empty void because someone has wounded you. And so once I was able to say, but the love that I've been searching for is still present, and it always has been, I don't need to search after it. And once I understood what I was doing, I could immediately understand it, and I could immediately stop it, and just do it differently.
Makes sense. It makes sense, and it even sort of brings me back to my own story. Like, I'm thinking about, moments in my life where I felt stuck, right? And I, needed to forgive different people in my life, or I needed to figure myself, right? And you're right. It's sort of like you're in this place of there's a void or a darkness that surrounds you. And until you sort of free yourself up, you can't fully be in the present. So I completely, identify with that for sure. And there is that sense of feeling free and able to sort of see, your life ahead of you now, because in some way, I feel like, if you don't let go, if you don't have the ability to actually be present and to relax, it's almost like you're stuck in the past. You're stuck in those wounded places, and unable to fully be here.
Exactly. And even as I extrapolate, what we experience as individuals to now what we experience as nations or communities, and I extrapolate what I do to especially the Black community and the wounds, the many wounds that we have, and our inability to be present, our inability to just stay and be focused, our inability to kind of, be one with ourselves. It's like we're scattered all over the place, and we keep running, just searching, and some of us running to just flee from some of those memories that we have of what's been done to us. So now my work simply focuses on how do we get us to a place where we forgive? How do we get us to a place where we heal? How do we get us to a place where we can be in the present and start looking towards the future? Because right now, a lot of us are stuck looking in the past. And so, I've done multiple forgivenesses of white people. I've done multiple forgivenesses of slavery. I've done multiple forgivenesses of the mental enslavement of our people. And as I do each of that, what I'm doing is I'm figuring out, okay, what do I need now to help transition my people? And so that's kind of the way that, my own transition has worked. It moved me from just focusing on myself, from my emotions, to now really being centered on what's my purpose and what the thing that I am born to do. And it's a beautiful thing when you know what your purpose is and the precise thing you're born to do, because then you can actually get it done. But in the unforgiveness, in the state of anger and despair, and just being so emotion focused, which our culture is, we get caught up in that, and so then we can't focus on what is spiritual, what is truly spiritual. Spirit is not emotional. Spirit is about building, it's about creating, it's about harnessing, it's about caring for, it's about protecting. And so if we're not in that mode and we're in emotion mode, it's always about us. But then once you heal, it can truly become about all other people.
Makes sense. So emotion mode is connected to self-interest, and spiritual mode is connected to I want to call it social interest, or the interest of others.
Right.
And I say social interest because it's a very Adlerian term for Adlerian psychology. And it has a lot to do with sort of this idea of, movement and direction. So when you're stuck in sort of your issue and your problem, you can't see anything but yourself. And there's lots of blame that goes on, right? But once you've, done the work, which it sounds like the vehicle and the catalyst here is forgiveness, right? Once you've done that work, then you can get to the place where you're like, okay, yes, I've been through this, but then, what is this teaching me? Or, how can I be free to then, help others to be free too, and to find what your purpose is. This is amazing.
Yeah, and the way that I wrote a book, it's called 490, Forgive and Live Fearlessly. And in that book, I write about my journey. And then there was a definite transition point, even in the book, where it became not about me anymore, but it became about our community. And it became about the human community, but I also then focus and I zoom in on who's the most wounded community. And if we then focus on the most wounded community and we get that community well, that community then can focus on its purpose, because every community has a purpose as well, right? And so if we can all just find our purpose and begin to move towards that humanitarian space of uniting together, then the world can transition, and it should transition into that better space. So I love what you had to say.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. And the hope is to get to that place, right? For sure. Okay, so I guess I want to find out a little bit more about if you wanted to give some tips, or share a little bit with individuals that, let's say, are going through what you're talking about. They're experiencing this sense of deep sadness, or sense of displacement or stuckness, when they're trying to relax, right? And they're recognizing they're not being present. What are some tips that you can share with them that could help them to get to this place of freedom?
Yes. And some people are ready to go directly to therapy. And so for those folks who are experiencing those kinds of symptoms and, those ways of being, I would say your first step should be try and find a therapist that you can connect with. First of all, think about what it is that you want before you engage with a therapist. And then really interview them and try and find the connection. But try and see if you can, every therapeutic process it's gonna come down to forgiveness anyways, and letting go. That's eventually what it does, right? So let's not fool ourselves. Every single one of us in the letting go process and the healing process is gonna have to forgive. The question is it gonna be obvious to you, or is it going to be hidden in some way, shape, or form, right? And so if you go the more direct route, then the forgiveness is very obvious. Now, I have some practices that I do, and one of them was created by this beautiful lady. Her name is Julia Cameron, and she's actually an artist, and most of us have an artistic side, but it's hidden. And so she talks about something called morning pages. Now, it's morning as in first thing in the morning, but it's also mourning as in grieving something that has been lost. Now, with this particular practice, what we do is first thing in the morning, what do we all do first thing in the morning as we get out of bed? We head to the washroom, right? We do a number one, we maybe do a number two, right? So this particular activity, the way that I've kind of recoined it is thought dumping. We shouldn't keep our pee, we shouldn't keep our poop. It should be dumped, right? And so the thoughts that are first thing in the morning should also be dumped. We should actually not pay too much attention to them, because you'll get caught up in them and they'll cycle you through many rabbit holes. So what I suggest is you make sure you have a journal beside your bed. First thing in the morning, you grab your journal, you grab your pencil, you sit down with your coffee, your tea, your water, whatever it is that you like to do. And now you begin to track your thoughts. I like to pretend that I'm in a little canoe, or even, a bigger boat, and that it's on water. And I might be in a stream, right? And some people refer to this as a stream of consciousness. But now what you're going to do is consciously track your thoughts. And you're pretending you're in the boat. And some mornings, as you write your journal, it's a nice, peaceful, quiet. Your thoughts are slow, they're quiet, they're restful. Some other mornings it feels like it's rushing, and it's almost like Niagara Falls, and you might go over the falls. That's kind of like how agitated, frustrated, whatever, angry you are. But essentially, every single thought that comes into your mind, you quickly jot it down. And it's not sentences. This is not a journal, so it's not like making sense. Every single thought, you track it, and you begin to then sense, okay, this is how I'm feeling. You write all your thoughts until you come to the end of 3 pages. And typically, by the time you get to the end of the 3 pages, your mind is absolutely blank. And so when then you get to this blank space, now you can think clearly. And as you begin to think clearly, you also begin to recognize the thing you want, right? Out of all the jumbles, there's always one thing that kind of comes off the page to you. There might be more than 1 or 2, but then you know the thing you want. And so the question is, how long do you have to do these journals in order to then activate and actually move towards the thing that you want? So you hold tight. Don't worry about acting the first day. Don't worry about acting the second day. Don't worry about the 6th week. But by the time you do get to the 6th week of doing this, you're like, I've had enough. I
was just about to say.
Sometimes it's taking a while for us to get there. But that's the point. For some people, you need a while. And for some people, you can move really quickly. But the point is, when we're in that kind of stuck mode, we often can't move. So what this is giving you is time to now begin to contemplate the thing you want. By the time you get to the 6th week, you actually start to move. And you start to decide, okay, this is what I want. This is what I need to do to make it happen. And by the 12th week, it has transformed your mind anyways, this type of journaling. There is a quiet rest, but now you've already started acting. So by the time you get to the 12th week of doing this, everything begins to transition. So that's just one of the activities that I do, but it's quite effective, and you can look it up online and look up Julia Cameron and morning pages, and it's very simple activity that you can do.
No, it sounds great. I think I'll even try it. I don't know if I'll get to 3 pages of writing, but
surprised.
But I think what I'm hearing here is sort of that idea of establishing a morning routine. And not paying too much attention to all the thoughts that flood a person, especially if it's a person that's overthinking a lot or has ruminating thoughts, not paying too much attention to the thoughts and just dumping them, like you said.
Yes.
And and I could see how that could be relieving in a sense, really reducing sort of anxiety,
Yes.
and allowing the person, as you said, to get to the place that they really want to be. What is that thing that they actually want to do or to talk about or to
Yes.
address? And I could see how the dumping could help to, pinpoint that specific thing.
Yeah. Some people are also meditators, so I would suggest that if you can focus enough to meditate, then absolutely do that as well. I went through my master's, my undergrad, my PhD, experiencing all the symptoms that I did. I kept them at bay because I always kept busy. And so I could motivate myself. I could push through them. I could just kind of get things done. Yeah. Whereas some people might not be in that highly motivated, charged kind of personality. So you might be experiencing PTSD or that sense of stuckness or that sense of loss, that sense of grief. A lot of us, and the way that I like to say it to my clients now is the long crying. Think about the wound that many of us receive. And for some of us, it's like a paper clip. For others, it's like a big gash across the chest. But it's the long cry because something has been lost, something has been taken from us. And the thing that has been taken from us is love. The thing that we want to see in all of our relationships is love. And so when we stop the long cry and give ourselves the permission to stop the long cry and to release those people who caused us to cry, then we can focus. And then we find that we actually get started on doing a lot of things that we've been meaning to and desiring to do for a really, really long
time. Definitely. You're such a gift to the Black community. And I love sort of your focus on wanting to, help the Black community to heal in this way. Because I do agree that, there is a global mourning, there's a global, sense of trauma that's happening, especially, in the US right now with all the things that are happening there. And, in a sense, a lot of people may not like that I say this, but thank you for 2020 in the sense that, it really brought up to the forefront these issues and, caused a lot of people to recognize that they need this healing. So
it has been the great time of rest. And I think, for every person that calls me and wants to start counseling, they always begin with, well, I guess it's because of COVID, And I said, yeah, it is because of COVID. We've had time to rest. And so,
let's start where they are, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, it was great talking with you, Joan. Thank you for sharing so much. And if I were to summarize, it sounds a lot like, you went through your own sort of experience, with traumatic past, with sort of grieving, and had to go through that process of, letting go and forgiving, and then identifying your purpose. And now you're helping others to do the same, to be able to identify what their demons are, to be able to let go of them and, forgive and move into sort of their purpose, which is
great.
If
I could add one more thing, because you just kind of triggered a thought. And the thought is this, that it is in our most painful moments that we find our purpose. Because it is in our most painful moment that we learn what love should look like. And then we can decide, I'm going to love in the way that I should have been loved here. And so in my wounding, my earliest wounding, it was disconnection. So now my purpose is about unity. It's about reconnecting. And so as you begin to understand that there is a process, a much, much higher level process than a psychological process that is at play in all of our lives, as we recognize that, we can look at our wounding moments very, very differently, because they're actually supposed to be the place where we learn to love the most. And it is then that we can actually look at others. So, in the same way that Harriet Tubman she was freed as a slave, but she didn't just say, this is about me.
Yeah.
She said, no, I have to go back and I have to help my people. And so she then built a system that would then allow her people to be freed. And so in the same way, we also have a very similar path that we have to walk. We have to free ourselves, or others help us to be freed. And then in that state of freedom, we look back and we say, who else do I need to help? And so there's always unity also in the wounds that we experience. And so we find our tribe also in the wounds that we experience, and we join with them so that we free others who've experienced the same thing.
Wonderful, wonderful. So there's that idea of recognizing that because you were disconnected, your purpose is to unify others. And that's amazing. And I wish you all the best in your endeavor to unify, us as a Black community. I'd love to hear more about that, once it gets underway, and hopefully you'll be close by so that we can have, our face-to-face conversations. But it was great having you, Dr. Joan, with us here on Meta Transitions.
It was a pleasure.
All right. So last question, how can our viewers connect with you? Because I'm sure I have viewers in Ontario who may want to experience, these forgiveness steps. So how can they contact you if they want to get help?
You can reach me in two places. So via web, you can find me at drjoan.ca, no dot in between for Dr. Joan. And then you can also find me at thevillageofpeace.com, all one word. And then on LinkedIn, you can find me at Joan Samuels Dennis. You can just search for my name, you'll find me there.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Hopefully you guys got the message, right? Digging deeper, recognizing, if you are stuck out there and you needing to let go, forgiveness is the key, and then identifying what your purpose is. Hopefully, you can get some help from Dr. Joan, and maybe her tips were helpful for you today. You take care. Until next time.